Good evening, everyone. My name is Reed Heddick. I'm a member of the Consent Decree Community Advisory Council. We've been instituted by the Independent Consent Decree Monitor for the City of Aurora. And we are joined here this evening by other members of the Consent Decree Council. You have Cassandra Webster's here, Bill Gondrez, and there may be another one or two joining us here in just a bit. And we are really pleased to be hosting this meeting. It corresponds with the 7th report from the Consent Decree Monitor. We've been involved in this process now for over 2.5 years. And so we are tasked by the Consent Decree and by the Monitor to make sure that there's communication that is going to the community and from the community during this process. And so we have had some sort of a public forum each time there's been a new report published. And we recently had the 7th report published. And so we are meeting together like this evening. The mission of the Community Advisory Council is to serve as a vital bridge between the community and the office of the Consent Decree Monitor for the City of Aurora. We are dedicated to promoting the effective implementation of reform efforts mandated by the Consent Decree. Our goal is to foster a safer, more just, and transparent policing environment. So this evening, in this meeting, we will have the monitor, our monitor, Jeff Slanger. They will be presenting a report from his 7th reporting period. We'll also be hearing an update from our police chief and our fire chief as well. And Cassandra, tell us a little bit more about sort of our format and how people can participate.
Sure. Tonight, as our presenters are presenting, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We're going to be curating those questions, and we'll be asking the questions that are most on topic to the presenters. And any questions that are not answered tonight, we will be posting those on auroramonitor.org. Are we ready to get started?
I think we are. And so, Jeff, we appreciate you spending this time with us this evening and are eager to hear a bit more about your 7th reporting period. And then, as we mentioned, there will be a brief time for some questions and comments at the end. So Jeff, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Reed, and thank you, Cassandra, and good evening to everyone online. My name is Jeff Schlanger, and I am the Independent Consent Decree Monitor for the City of Aurora. I want to thank you for being here tonight at this town hall. As Pastor Reed mentioned, we try to do this after every reporting period, and it's an important part of the process. Before diving into the RP7 report and giving you a look at our progress under the consent decree, I want to acknowledge something that I think is very important to understand. And that is that despite the progress in the consent decree mandates that I will be talking about, it is clear, and both myself and the CAC certainly recognize that there are deep wounds in the community, wounds that clearly aren't healed, and that each of us understands that we need to do all that we can to help in that healing process. For some, the wounds may never heal. But hopefully for most of the community, as our reforms become more embedded in Aurora public safety, the healing process will be completed. I often say that the best police departments in the world, those with the best policies, the best training, and the best operational integrity, are still ultimately likely to have questionable incidents. We in Aurora are working as hard as we can to minimize those incidents, and when they do occur, to have the community know that the department involved and the system will deal with them appropriately. I want to say something here that I say often, and that is that the progress that we make in reforms really will not be a success if it comes at the expense of fighting crime. Critical incidents that occur in our community highlight the importance of the work we are doing under the consent decree. Our mission is to foster a culture of professionalism, integrity, and accountability across all aspects of public safety in Aurora, yet at the same time ensure that the Aurora Police Department and Fire Rescue are well equipped to address the challenges to our community's safety. In short, we want to make sure that these agencies earn and enjoy the broadest trust possible in the community they serve. Tonight, I am going to try to be as brief as I can in my prepared remarks so as to give as much time to those who are online to ask questions. I want to give you the headline of RP7 before we turn to the slideshow, and that is that progress and substantial progress continues to be made, and that for the most part, we are seeing that the reforms to policy and training are taking hold and are being followed on the streets of Aurora. Now let's turn to the slides if we can, and let's go to the first slide. An overview of the consent decree. What is the consent decree? In short, the consent decree was initiated in 2021, is a binding agreement between the City of Aurora and the Attorney General's office, and it is focused on reforms in biased policing, use of force, accountability, transparency, and recruitment, hiring, and promotion. The goal is to create systematic and systemic change in Aurora's public safety systems and to restore trust and ensure fairness and equity. The consent decree, however, is a technical document with technical requirements, notwithstanding that the goal is clear and that public safety, that goal is that public safety must be all that it can be for the citizens of Aurora. Next slide, please. Again, these are the areas of the consent decree. In each of these areas, there are what have been broken down into mandates, and it is the role of the monitor to ensure compliance with those mandates in each of these areas while providing technical assistance, engaging in the community and with the community. And we do that in part through the Community Advisory Council and reporting our progress to stakeholders. Next slide, please. This is a graphical representation of the role of the monitor. As I said, those four different aspects of what we do: oversights of mandates, technical assistance, engagement with the community, and reporting to the parties, the court, and the public. Next slide, please. As Reed has mentioned, I established the Community Advisory Council in early 2022, shortly after we were selected to be the monitor of the consent decree. And the primary function of the Community Advisory Council is to serve as a conduit between the community and the monitor. Today, it is comprised of approximately 15 members, and those community members were selected by me with the advice and consent of the chair and co-chair of the Community Advisory Council. Next slide, please. This is a slide on the process, and again, I've told you that it's technical. I won't get into this in great detail. We have the consent decree. We have what we call disaggregated the consent decree and come up with methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance. There is a specific methodology for each mandate. We assess that on an ongoing basis. We are now reporting twice a year. And in that report, we use a grading system for each of the mandates to inform the public as to where those mandates stand. Next slide, please. Again, with respect to each mandate, we disaggregated those. We are not doing this in a what might be called by some monitoring by ambush. Everyone knows exactly what is expected of their agency in terms of each of the mandates of the consent decree. They know what data it is that we will be looking for, and they know how they are going to be judged with respect to their degree of compliance. Next slide, please. So the consent decree is really a marathon, certainly not a sprint. It is envisioned to last at least 5 years. And I know the parties are hoping that it's only those 5 years that it does in fact last. And I have every reason to believe that that is certainly possible. In the first 2 years of the consent decree, we concentrated on new policies, new training, and the development and delivery of those policies and training. In the beginning of year 3, which began last February 15th, we began monitoring the operational integrity of the consent decree in a very concentrated and defined way. What do I mean by operational integrity? What I mean by operational integrity is that the policies and the training, which we have worked on in years 1 and 2, are actually being followed by the members of each agency on the streets of Aurora. That is what operational integrity is. Next slide, please. Again, this is how we communicate progress. We use what are called Harvey balls. It's really, again, part of the technical assessment that we are mandated to do. And this is the way we communicate our technical assessment of compliance. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see the status of the various mandates. On the left-hand column are the different areas of the consent decree. And on each of those areas, or in each of those areas, are the number of mandates that are in each level of compliance. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner that there are a total of 78 mandates, 25 of which are in full compliance, 32 of which were in full compliance in the last reporting period. 11 are 75 to 99% done, and so on across the board. Of note, there are 2 mandates which, although well along, are still on a cautionary track, and we can talk a little bit about those in a moment. I want to talk about the focus issues that we touched upon in our report. And by the way, our report is posted on our website, as is this PowerPoint. That website is auroramonitor.org, and you'll find our RP7 reports and all of our prior reports on the reports page of that website. These were the focus issues of RP7. We talked about the Kylan Lewis fatal officer-involved shooting, the appointment of Chief Chamberlain, operational integrity and risk reviews, which is a methodology by which we are assessing the operational integrity of each of the mandates. We talked about data-driven crime reduction, quality assurance unit that is now called the Constitutional Policing Unit, which is being set up by the police department. We talked about data systems improvement, enhanced customer communications, hiring process developments, and the completion of the first round of bias training. In terms of the operational integrity status, this is where we stand in terms of policies and training. Operational integrity has been fully achieved, 50 to 74% in both addressing racial bias in policing and uses of force. We are on a cautionary track, and this is what I was talking about before, for the documentation, of stops. That is mostly because of data issues and an inability still to define and to be able to assess the degree of compliance of officers in the field in terms of completing what is known as the CDC. So that's a form that captures each stop that is made by Aurora police officers. In terms of the use of ketamine and other chemical sedatives, operational integrity has been fully achieved. And with respect to accountability and transparency, 50 to 74% and on the right track. Yet with recruiting, hiring, and promotion, there too, there is a cautionary track. And that again is mostly due to data issues in terms of being able to measure where people are dropping out of the process and thereby not having a full ability to determine adverse consequences on certain minority groups in the hiring process. Next slide, please. So again, going back to the headline, substantial progress being made. I have no doubt that working together, we are going to get to the finish line. I think that it will be around the 5-year mark that we get to that finish line, and we will have at that point a public safety system which is really a model for the rest of the country. And what will that mean? It will mean that the quality of arrests and citizen contacts is up, that uses of force are down, that crime is down, that officer safety is up, and most importantly, that public trust and confidence in both APD and AFR is up as well. So with that, we can go to the last slide, which is really just letting you know that I'm ready to take questions.
So thank you, Jeff. At this moment, we have not gotten questions in the chat yet. You have done such an outstanding job of explaining this. Apparently, there's no questions unanswered yet. Those of you that are online, we encourage you to put any questions or comments that you would like addressed in the chat so that we can pass them along. Okay, some things are coming in now, so we encourage that. Cassandra, do you want to get those to Jeff?
We have someone asking if there can be real systematic change with so much overturn of our police chiefs.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is it is more difficult. I have been doing this for a long time, have worked in many departments, and I will say that I have never been in a department in which there was not a change in leadership. So it is often the consent decree monitor, which I served as, who is really the constant throughout the process of reform. So it is not the best to have that kind of turnover. But fortunately, now we have a permanent chief who I know is fully invested in the consent decree, and hopefully will be with us for a long time to come, certainly until the end of the consent decree.
Thank you. We have another question. 2 years ago, did you expect that Aurora would have made this much progress, or has it accelerated the pace at which it comes into compliance?
I really didn't know what to expect coming into this. A lot depends on the frame of mind of leadership and their investment in the consent decree. So on day one, I was unsure as to what degree of progress we would be making and how fast it would come and how contentious it would be. I am very happy to report that everyone who I have dealt with at APD, at AFR, in the city manager's office, in the city attorney's office, is fully invested in this consent decree. And that goes for every interim chief that was part of this process along the way. So in answer to the question, I didn't know at the beginning that it was going to go as well as I believe it has. But I found out soon that people were committed, and that has certainly greased the skids and made it much more easy to achieve what we need to achieve ultimately and what we have achieved thus far.
Yeah. Where we have someone who's asking for clarification. They asked, when you talk about transparency and accountability, they're asking transparent and accountable of what exactly?
Yeah, so transparency, there are a couple of mandates in the consent decree that talk about transparency and accountability specifically. Those mandates talk about the processes and the statistics of APD and AFR. As I think some of those who are online may know, and certainly the people gathered know, the city has set up a transparency portal, and that is certainly part of the process. And there will be a phase 2 of that transparency portal coming about. But transparency is also making sure that the public is informed along the way relative to items of concern, critical incidents. And I know that Chief Chamberlain and Chief Otten are both fully invested in making sure that that transparency exists as well. In terms of accountability, there is a process of accountability within each department. And accountability really means that those who have transgressed the policies of either department are held accountable for those transgressions. Does that necessarily mean that they will be terminated? Clearly not. Most transgressions are dealt with through coaching and mentoring and training, and those are methods of accountability. And I mentioned the risks process before, which stands for remediation of identified situations key to success. We identify small problems in those sessions as part of operational integrity before they become big problems. So accountability is a huge part of reform, a huge part of making sure that the police department and fire rescue can be all that they can be, because without accountability, obviously, there are going to be many more failures than we would like to see.
Thank you. We have another question. I will wait to address that with Chief Chamberlain. So moving on to the next question. How was the recruiting of police officers at the Trump rally taken into account in the consent decree scoring system?
So that happened after the end of the reporting period, number one. In terms of the recruitment hiring process, we, and this report is online as well, we did a deep dive into the recruiting process. It did not include, obviously, the recruitment at the Trump rally, because again, that was beyond this period's purview. That being said, my view of that is, and my understanding of that is, that this was the efforts of a recruiter who thought that it was advisable to try to get as many people, and obviously people who will be able to pass through the process as possible, and saw this as an opportunity to do just that. Whether that concept was as well thought through as it might have been, I can't really say.
We have a few other questions, but due to time, I'm going to have to move those questions to our question and answer sheet on auroramonitor.org. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Chamberlain.
And Chief Chamberlain showed up here live in person here at the Aspen Room in the city building. Chief, we're glad that you're here. I'm going to have you go up here so you can be front and center.
Sure.
And let me also mention that we are in the city building, and back here is Ryan Luby, an employee of the city that's helping us monitor things. But we are not, this is not a city meeting. We are not a city committee or group, but they are just sort of hosting us here. Just want to make sure that's clear. The attorneys want to make sure that we make that statement. I don't know if they do or not. I just made that up.
Chief, it sounds good.
Chief, thank you for being here.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to be here, to have a conversation. And I tell you, if I'm looking at the question, that's really what I'm going to focus on more than anything, because I want the community and I want people that have concerns or issue to have that opportunity to have discussions. So again, I want to focus on that. But what I do also want to focus on is the consent decree and what it means to this police department. And a lot of the questions that you're asking specifically relate to that. And the one thing I want to say without question, again, I've had the opportunity to go through a consent decree before in my prior position, and I understand the good, the bad, and the indifferent of it. And I think so much of it is the collaboration of all the parties involved, of how well that consent decree process will go. And when I mean all parties, I mean the monitor, I mean the department, and I mean the community. And from my time here already, I can say that that is a trajectory that we are in a very good place at. Again, with Jeff and with his team, we're not buddies. We're not friends. And I'd be very open about that. We have a very, very good and a very solid relationship, but it's also a very professional relationship. The collaboration that we are doing, the goals that we are setting, the achievement that we are striving for is based on, I hope, and I would agree, that's what I really feel is based on a mutual respect that I understand what the monitor's job is. I understand what his role and his team's objectives are. And I am in concurrence with those. There's, things that I think without question needed to be modified and changed in this organization. There's things that I feel need to be modified and changed in law enforcement as a whole. But there are some things, again, that the monitor and we have discussions on about what's the best way and the best tack to do it. And the thing that I really want to just kind of summarize on that is the mutual respect, I hope, that we are both moving towards the same goalpost. And I'm not going to speak on behalf of my counterpart in the fire, but again, that is a big part of this as well. And our relationship together is a collaborative relationship where we are striving to achieve the community's objectives of what they see in a renewed and a 21st century and a modern police agency. And so I want to let everybody know that's what we are working for. And it's a holistic approach. It's not a singular approach. I want to real quickly go over some of the things that we are at and some of the highlights where we are at for 24. Again, for us, we just adopted a new beta version of the transparency porthole. And so we're really focused on how information and how details are getting sent out to the community and what they can see, which is basically everything. My belief in transparency does not stop. I will not give a canned answer or a muted answer. I will give very specific details about what's occurring within that agency. Another part of it is we are moving forward on our bias module. Again, that's been kind of a sticky point. We have had the consent decree monitors who have attended our bias training. And to be honest with you, I don't think they were overly thrilled with it. I think there were still some opportunities to improve it and make it more successful. And that's definitely what we're moving towards. We're also looking at the bias module for the spring coming up, and as well as the fall in service to make sure that it's consistent with the ideas that are intertwined within the consent decree and our areas that we as a law enforcement agency need to adhere to and be aware of. We're also looking at what's known as our 360-degree operational reviews. To me, this is incredibly important because basically what we do at an 8-week rotation, we look at use of forces, we look at arrests, we look at contacts, we look at citation data. And again, that's constantly evolving and constantly changing for each of the commands that we have. And these analysis, these self-audits are really important to me, and they also reflect within the consent decree overall. And as was mentioned earlier by the monitor, again, the Office of Constitutional Policing, it's basically the quality assurance audit, but the name to me means everything. The name means that this law enforcement agency is adhering to the constitutional standards of the United States, that we are assuring that we are a constitutionally driven police department, that we assure that we are taking all actions that our officers do, good, bad, or indifferent, into account and ensuring that they are the highest standard of law enforcement. So those are just some of the things I wanted to articulate out. But really more importantly, for me anyway, I wanted to talk about the questions that are up there because people are throwing questions up and we only have a limited period of time. And I want to be as open about those questions as possible. So.
The first question was addressed here that states that Chief Chamberlain said to me personally at a recent community Q&A that if future President Trump manages to pass a law giving police total immunity and a directive to shoot protesters, that he will follow the law. Has anyone addressed this with you or the department?
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the question, but that is 100% false and misleading information. There is no way, based upon a law, based upon an issue, whatever it's going to be, that we would consider shooting protesters at a peaceful demonstration or an event. When we are involved in crowd control and crowd management, and it doesn't matter if it's the city of Aurora or if it's Los Angeles or if it's New York or Minneapolis or anybody else, law enforcement will respond according to the protesters and according to the the situation that is unfolding. Very, very rarely is it ever to the point where law enforcement is engaged in lethal force situation at a protest. I have been involved in thousands of protests. I've been involved in hundreds of civil disobedience. I've been involved in countless First Amendment marches and situations. And it doesn't matter what President Trump does or what he doesn't do. Again, we are going to have our tactics be consistent with what the standards are within the Constitution of the United States, with the protocol of statutes and laws, both at a federal, a state, and a local level. And in order for it ever to get to a situation where we would just open fire on individuals, there would have to be specific threats on the community, specific threats on the people that are involved in that demonstration or march, and specific threats at officers. Our use of force policy, specifically related to officer-involved shootings, does not change upon the situation. The officer still must be able to articulate out a particular threat directed towards him or her, and that's what the response will be. It is not a blanket statement, no matter what occurs or no matter who's sitting in office. If there's some law or what some executive order that would be put into place, that is not acceptable. It's not going to happen. Now, during a civil disobedience, can there be levels of violence that raise to a use of force that would involve a shooting? Yes, absolutely. And I think if you look back at 2020, there was a number of situations throughout the United States where we had officers that were shot, we had community members that were shot, and we also had protesters who were shot, and not all necessarily by law enforcement. The majority were done by individuals in and around the crowd or something that was unfolding. Were there confrontations with law enforcement where force was used to a level of deadly force at some of these events? Yes, there were. I think you could look at Dallas as an example where two armed assailants came on to a demonstration, a protest that started out as a First Amendment march, which then broke down and ultimately officers were fired at. One officer was hit by two individuals that were in the group with long rifles, shooting within the crowd and shooting at officers. But that is not the standard practice, and it never will be the standard practice. So however you took that information, that is not what was detailed. That was not what was specific. This department is here to support First Amendment marches. Again, First Amendment marches are done lawfully. They're done within the statutes, the laws. If those deviate, then those don't become First Amendment marches anymore. Those become acts of civil disobedience. And there are different tactics and there's different operations and different procedures in place to deal with those events. Next question.
This person is referencing something that happened about a week ago. They said that Chief Chamberlain's department assaulted a group of peaceful protesters with their cars about a week ago. They were asking for justice for Kylan Lewis.
Yes, there was a protest that occurred. It started, I think, around 10 o'clock on a Saturday or a Sunday. We had our law enforcement personnel out there again for a First Amendment march to be able to monitor and assist and guide and help in any way possible. There was a conversation, which all of this was captured on body-worn video, with the organizers of that march. And it said specifically, we will support you. We will ensure your safety from point A to point B. But you cannot take over streets. You cannot stop traffic. You cannot do a lot of the things that unfortunately were completely disregarded almost immediately after the march started. We waited almost 30 to 40 minutes. And again, this is all captured on body-worn video before any arrests were made. Again, it was a hazard to the community. It was a hazard to the marchers. Again, there was only about 15 to 20 marchers that were there. They took over all three lanes of Alameda, which is our major intersection here in Aurora. Again, it wasn't safe for them to be in that intersection. It wasn't safe for the community. It wasn't as safe for emergency vehicles. Details specifically of what was going to be allowed and what was not going to be allowed were given out specifically to the organizers and everybody at that event. It was a complete disregard. Again, that's a decision that you have. We can't control that decision, but we can control the enforcement of laws when it goes from a First Amendment march to a civil disobedience that is a hazard to everybody involved. Next question.
Since the SWAT response in confronting Kylan Lewis violated basic police training and more advanced training, are you addressing the fact that the tactical training is more responsible for bad outcomes at APD than any bias?
Yeah, again, with that particular shooting that you're referring to, again, we did look at both the criminal possibility within that event. Again, the district attorney looked at it. There was actually a grand jury that was convened of peers within this community. They found that there was no legal deviation from what occurred or how it occurred, and there was no possibility for filing. So there was not a case filed on that. And administratively, just so you know, we looked at that administratively as well. We looked at it from the perspective of tactics, which are force review boards. And we also looked at it as far as administratively, as far as internal affairs, was there any misconduct? Again, that was found to be within policy of the organization and what our policies, procedures are, as well as the training. The one thing that I will tell you, and I agree 100%, is that there is always opportunity to improve, always opportunities to make things better. And this is one example that I am really pressing into that. We are doing an analysis of our SWAT team. We are looking at the personnel that were in the SWAT team. We are looking at the events that they're involved in. We are also looking at training. We've developed about 3 or 4 different systems in place now to make sure that we are, one, screening down the search warrants, making sure that they are the proper search warrants to be implemented by SWAT. We are also making sure that, again, that incident that you're talking to, that was a search warrant for an individual who had shot at there was a running gun battle that was going. And during this running gun battle, he ended up shooting a 62-year-old blind man who had absolutely nothing to do with that event. To me, that's another victim of this unfortunate event. And so again, that happened in Denver. Denver came to us and asked if we could assist with that. So now not only are we looking at a screen down process, we're looking at a SWAT after action report to see how it occurred, what didn't occur. But we're also making sure that the warrants are vetted in a much more systematic manner, where we're not taking on warrants for everybody that says, hey, I need a SWAT team, because not every incident raises to a SWAT team. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. We are evaluating our SWAT operations. We're evaluating the personnel in our SWAT operations, and we are going to come up, and we have come up with some incredibly new systems to make sure that we are in check and standardized across the nation.
I'm going to ask one last question, and then we will post the remaining questions and answers at auroramonitor.org. Who makes the decision on whether APD will assist ICE?
Absolutely. And again, like most municipal law enforcement agencies, I will stay consistent with that across the nation. Municipal law enforcement agencies are not in the process or in the position to enforce federal laws related to immigration as far as documented or undocumented. But at that same note, I do use ICE, and I will continue to use ICE as a tool to address individuals, documented, undocumented, that are involved in violence or crimes or victimizing the community. And again, to me, that is the differentiation, and that's the mark. Again, we had a very tragic event that occurred over this past week. We had Venezuelans located up in the Dallas apartment complexes, which everybody's aware of. And like most gangs and most groups, they were victimizing their own ethnicity. They were victimizing other Venezuelans. And I don't think that's unique, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of crime that's occurring in there. And I think there's a lot of really bad and evil behavior that's occurring. And they're specifically focusing on their own race and ethnicity, because again, there's a high propensity that those people will not report it. So am I going to use ICE to hold those people accountable that hurt somebody else, that tortured somebody else, that victimized somebody else? Absolutely. And I'm going to continue to do it in the future. Am I going to be part of mass deportations or anything else like that? Again, that is not a municipality's role. That is a federal entity that's involved in that. And so again, there's very clear demarcation, and that's where I stand on that process.
You're welcome. Thanks, Chief. We'll let you jump back to the back chair. Okay, thank you. We know that there are lots of questions for the chief. Chief always gets lots of questions. A lot of questions. And again, it's just not possible for us to address all of those here this evening. But again, we will get all those questions in. There will be answers on auroramonitor.org. And you can find them there. And again, it is our goal to be, provide these kinds of opportunities for the public to, to hear directly from the chiefs and the monitor. And so we will try to do more of these sessions if we have lots of questions we need to get to. So thank you, Chief. Thank each of you for your questions. You are asking some great questions. The Aurora Fire Rescue is also a part of the consent decree. And so we have Chief Otten online here with us. And has a brief presentation. We'll also be taking questions. So you can feel free questions for him in the chat. Chief, thanks for being with us tonight.
Great, thank you very much. And Dawn, my strategic communications manager, is bringing up a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation that'll just guide us through the conversation. So certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here and want to take advantage of this to really emphasize what is an ongoing commitment and energy around the consent decree and supporting its recommendations. And so since its implementation, we've, I think, actively and meaningfully engaged with the monitor and approached the work that we're doing here in Aurora Fire Rescue really as a true partnership. The monitor's provided us with really good feedback, which has been invaluable in driving what's been positive and transformative changes within AFR. And these reforms have improved policy governance. They've strengthened our coordination with our partners in APD. They've expanded our quality assurance and accountability practices, and they've introduced, I think, innovative training programs within our organization, and they've enhanced recruitment efforts for us and really given us some areas of focus. So through these changes, we're not only, I think, elevating the quality of service for Aurora, but really contributing to advancements in the nation's fire service. And I'm hoping you're going to see some of that in our next accreditation processes. Some of the things that we're doing here are identified as leading practices within our industry nationally. And so I'm excited about that. And I'm proud of the people within our organization who have done a ton of work around this really critical project and continue to dedicate themselves to meeting the expectations and the needs of our community. So I just want to touch on a couple of things that that we've done, the progress that we've made. Some of it's in the time that I've been here. And so I came in March of 23, but some of it's also been really since the inception of the consent decree. And we're committed to this continuous improvement through policy development, training, accountability reforms, all to improve our members' performance and deliver what is the best care to our community. And need to reflect on the progress that's been made over the past 2 years since the consent decree was established. And I'll list some of these if it's okay with the group. But although the consent decree did include policies for how ketamine should be used in the field, that sedative was banned from our units in September of 2020. So we don't use ketamine anymore. I know that's a question that I'll hear from time to time, and that has been banned. Since the end of last year, and as you saw in the Harvey Balls, AFR has been in substantial compliance with the consent decree and developing a plan for our recruiting and hiring programs and to attract and hire a diverse group of qualified individuals to help serve this community. Last year, we developed and implemented de-escalation training for all of our sworn AFR members. And I know the monitor has seen this. A lot of the members of the Community Advisory Council have seen this training as well. And the crux, the purpose of this training is really to prepare our first responders to diffuse people who are in emotional distress or crisis in these emergency situations where we encounter people through mindfulness, self-awareness, and sensitivity, as well as their body positioning, voice modulation, and other practices that try and really bring that anxiety level down, soothing the member of the community and who might be experiencing anxiety, stress, or psychological trauma. Scenario-based training was developed in collaboration with APD. In fact, we used a vendor that they had used to provide as realistic an environment as we could for our members. We also implemented new citywide protocols to dispatch the appropriate level of care for each call that's received by Aurora 911. This program, we call it Right Response. And I think what was really important about that is the organization was moving at such a fast pace. It was really difficult to settle and focus on the person who was right in front of you, the human that was right in front of you, because there was so much going on in the district around you. And so that was really important to decompress the system so we could take our time and be focused, especially when it comes to de-escalation. There's no replacement for time and trust building when you're in that kind of environment. And so I'm pretty excited about that. We look back on this year and do sort of a 2020 in review. It was really a year of that focused on quality assurance and recalibration. We've been on a steady path for improving our operations and nurturing our relationship with the community, marking the third year. We're in the third year of the monitorship. This year's been a year of operationalizing new policies and training that were introduced in the consent decree's initial stages. It's been about ensuring policies are being followed properly, or that we're refining these policies should they need revision. It's also been focusing, ensuring that EMS documentation materials like patient care reports are timely and accurate and complete. And earlier this year, we provided robust documentation and legal training. Consent decree and CAC is also aware of this. It was led by nationally recognized industry specialists for all of our crew members. We would even pay them overtime to come if they needed to come off duty. They addressed legal and ethical issues related to providing pre-hospital care in the field, with a real focus on informed decision-making and informed and implied consent, which is really important, particularly in spaces where we'll find medical conditions where people lack the capacity to make decisions for themselves. They're disoriented or they're in crisis. These workshops that we provided were really the first in the region. They were attended by over 250 of our AFR members, as well as 100 representatives from outside entities, including Falck and other regional fire and EMS departments. This is a pretty significant highlight. We've talked a lot about this with the monitor and with the CAC, but at the end of last year, we reestablished what we call the Community Medical Services Branch. And previously, before it was dissolved in 2018, this was the EMS Bureau. And it is a critical component of leadership and management in a fire and EMS agency. EMS is about 70% of the work that we do, and it needs its own oversight. It's highly technical, and it requires a lot of monitoring, loop closure. So we also worked to build out this EMS team throughout 2024. We added a captain as well as an EMS program manager and an advanced practice clinical educator, which we previously did not have within the system. The clinical educator comes to us with the emergency department. They're an independent practitioner. They're a physician's assistant. So they work in an ER as a doctor, essentially taking care of people, also with a background in paramedicine, paramedic education, and really elevate the quality of care that we're giving, or quality of instruction that we're giving to our folks. The program manager specifically oversees medical data management and quality assurance, which is a key component of any medical system. As part of that, building out that infrastructure, we mandate 100% quality assurance review and strict adherence to protocols for all calls involving sedative administration or restraints. And we're now also required to document any deviations, even if they were approved by medical direction, from protocol on emergency patient care reports for every call that we run. So that's some of the highlights. That's not all we've done over the past year, but it's definitely some highlights that I think are important to this team. As we look ahead as to what's coming in 2025, some of the problems, right, that I identified when I got here with specifically with respect to our medical care system and oversight, was that we lacked the quality assurance program and we lacked the advanced practice clinical educator, but we also didn't have coaches, mentors, supervisors in the field. And so in 2025, we will be adding 3 new battalion chief positions, 4 total battalion chiefs that are overseeing community medical services delivery in the city. We've done some of this through restructuring within our organization. One of them is a new FTE, and these folks will be actively involved in community medical care throughout the organization. The battalion chief is the highest ranking position that's out in the field, and so it carries some authority. And it's going to be filled by, as outlined in city charter, by promoting from within our ranks. 3 of the 4 EMS battalion chiefs will work on a 24-hour shift and will provide department-wide EMS oversight in the field. And one of the positions will be on a 40-hour working on project management and supporting the CMS branch. You saw the report on our demographics, and I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit short of time, but that we had some improvements in gender diversity, but didn't have the same improvements in racial diversity when comparing it to our workforce in 2023. So we've got some work to do in this area and building bridges to underrepresented communities. And we've been working with a public safety digital marketing consultant, and we're going to be excited to launch marketing materials next year that are specifically designed to build these bridges to our community, as well as refining how it is and where it is we go to recruit, with a real focus on NCAA member schools, athletic programs, and those kinds of things where there is a beautifully diverse recruitment pool, as well as people that share a lot of our organization's core values in that. In collaboration with APD, we are also finalizing a joint policy. That provides a shared understanding for scene management practices and medical protocols for assessing and evaluating agitated or combative individuals who may be in crisis, to determine what's causing the behavior and provide appropriate care while ensuring safety, right, for the person who's in crisis and the emergency responders. Some key points of that include deployment of the crisis response team and the AMRT if we have concerns about deterioration of the safety of the patient and the crew. That APD, it outlines and clarifies APD and medical control hold the authority to determine whether an M1 hold, which is basically transporting a patient against their will for an emergency mental health hold, whether or not that's needed. It outlines too that if we're contacting a patient and it poses a greater risk to engage them than it does to back out, or there's an imminent threat, that we are empowered to back out and leave the scene to avoid escalating the incident. There was a lack of clarity in that. It also clarifies that verbal de-escalation should always be first used if the situation allows, and outlines if physical restraints or sedatives are needed for people who lack decision-making capacity or are so violent that they need that to be cared for life-threatening emergencies. That's outlined very, very clearly, and some of the roles that are associated with that. It also specifies what's critically important, which is the continued monitoring of these patients to look for conditions or injuries that may have resulted if there was a struggle that was going on. In 2025, we're going to be looking to tabletop exercises and then scenario-based training that'll be joint training between both of the public safety agencies to make sure that we fully understand these policies and what our roles are in each. And last but not least, I'm sorry to talk for so long, but I think this is really important. We're looking forward in the next year to really digging into our 2024 strategic plan that we just completed last summer. As part of this process, we engaged, I know Reed was there, but we engaged in multiple meetings and discussions with the community to gather input that led to the development of that plan. It's a community-driven strategic plan. It was a collaborative process and involved AFR members, as well as a broad mix of residents from across the city, community leaders, and partner organizations. And these individuals who participated really contributed crucial insights and ideas as we set out to identify performance gaps, establish our path forward, and prioritize what goals we're going to work towards. It reflects where we are today, where we should be, and then how we get where we want to be to best support the current and future needs of you and our members. It'll guide future budget development, internal and external service delivery, and decision-making for agency. You can find that plan if you're interested in digging into it in the city's website by going to auroragov.org. I know that's confusing, so auroragov.org/fire. But I would like to, if I can, just really quickly as we close out, share our refined mission and vision that are outlined in the plan, because these bedrocks of the organization's purpose and aspirations were definitely due for a refresh to make them better aligned with what what we want to be for our community. These came directly as through that collaborative effort from our members and were validated and shared with at ward meetings and to seek feedback for that. But so you can see it, our updated vision for this organization is to positively impact the safety, well-being, and sense of security for our community by providing expert quality, human-centered care. That's actually our mission. But and our vision is to lead the nation in fire, rescue, and emergency services through our culture of excellence, investment in our members, and connection with our community. That we will never strive for mediocrity, settle for mediocrity, I'm sorry, but always strive for perfection. And I think that's a powerful statement about who the men and women in Aurora Fire Rescue want to be for you. And we will get there. So thank you for your time. I did see one question. It looks like it's from Kathy. I think that's a great question because it really is probably a little bit of a deeper societal issue. A good friend of mine, Ray Beasley, who's the past president of the Henrico NAACP, and I had several conversations with him about how it is we overcome that barrier. And I think there's what he explained to me is you have to understand that we are one generation removed from fire services turning their hose lines on people. And that is a huge hurdle to overcome. You have to make sure that when you're communicating with families that they recognize how the organizations have changed. They recognize that these agencies are community helpers. They're neighbors helping neighbors. And that is not the use of the fire service. It is not how we will engage with our community. And really reemphasize the power of this is a blind service. You know, when we go to a call, we have no idea who you are, what gender you are, what political affiliation you are, who you love, who you worship, any of that, right? We are going sometimes fast, to help people in that emergency, regardless of who you are. When we're crawling around in a smoke-filled room, we can't see you, right? We are just there to help you, and it really is truly a blind service. So anyway, so that's and I've got one more question here. Are you okay if I to the moderators? Are you okay? So it says, are you aware that the law no longer allows police to use any force to enforce a mental health hold? The statute, I am aware that the statutes changed in June. The only folks that are allowed to make decisions about whether or not there's a mental health hold are what we call intervening professionals. So intervening professionals are psychologists, mental health nurses, law enforcement, or physicians. And so as a paramedic, a firefighter, we can't make those decisions. But I am not in law enforcement, so I don't know what the rules are around the use of force in any circumstance. I only know who can make those decisions. So that's how I would answer that question. So thank you for your time. And I appreciate it. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I would love to engage with you in the written responses as well. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief Otten. We appreciate your time and for all that information and responding to those things in the chat. We have had several comments come in the chat that we will have the people that the questions were addressed to respond to them, and those answers will all be on the auroramonitor.org website. And Jeff, I think those go under the Community Advisory Council tab. Jeff, you're muted, Jeff.
That's
There we
where
go.
we'll put them, under the CAC tab.
Okay, so be on the auroramonitor.org, the CAC or Community Advisory Council tab. There will be a slot where all of those questions and answers will be given by the people that the questions were directed to. Okay. Let me also mention to you that there's lots of information on auroramonitor.org. All of the 7 reports are on there, as well as several other things. There are other reports that are just a part of sort of the periodic reports. They're on that website as well. And so there's lots of other information, as well as a place for you to address questions directly to the monitor. And there's even a place on several places on that website where you can file a complaint about, APD, AFR, or about, any of the other agencies. So those things are all available on auroramonitor.org. And as you saw, the recording tonight's meeting will be on the city's YouTube channel. And it takes a little while for that video to process, but it'll be there so that you can access it at any time. And so if you have friends that missed this, or if you want to go back and just double check some of the things that were said, you can jump on that. And Jeff, I think you guys can put a link on the monitor website as well, so that people can go to that YouTube channel, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate each of you that have presented tonight. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chief Otten and Chief Chamberlain, for your time this evening. Thank you for CAC members that are here, Cassandra, Bill, and Jeanette, our chair. Thank you, Ryan, for making sure that we didn't mess things up too much tonight.
Thank you.
And most of all, we thank all of you that participated online. We are here to serve you and make sure that your voices are heard and information from the monitor and from the consent decree process gets to you. And so we thank you for taking the time and the effort to be here tonight. We thank you for your questions. We appreciate your passion for this community and to get this right. So thank you for joining us. So thank you all for being here this evening, and we will be in touch. Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to all. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.